Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we've seen McDonnell of Virginia. He's a model for Christie in New Jersey, Scott Brown, and these sort of stealth reactionaries that the Republicans are fielding. People who don't even say that they're Republicans. Here's the central issue posed by these budget cuts, right? Very, very popular issue among Tea Party denizens. The problem with budget cuts in a world economic depression is the more you cut your state budget, the bigger your deficit will be in the following year. That is because in a depression, where we now are, the role of government expenditure in the economy as a whole has become preponderant. Yes, that's true. That's one of the effects of a depression, when so many private companies go bankrupt, when industrial activity is gone and zombie banks dominate the scene. Obviously, there are some new things that have been introduced that make matters even worse. But the general rule still holds with a vengeance. You cut the budget now, you induce these cuts of the type McDonnell and other reactionaries are now demanding, and the Democrats are eager to go along, you will have a bigger deficit. You cut the Virginia budget by $2.2 billion. That destroys jobs. That destroys economic activity. There's a multiplier effect associated with every job of a teacher or a healthcare worker. There are community supermarkets, clothing stores, and so forth, retail outlets that depend on that. You destroy those jobs, you're destroying whole communities. You're also destroying the tax revenue that those direct people that you're firing, as well as the people who depend on them, the local businesses that they patronize. So the net effect, especially in a depression, of cutting the budget, you cut the budget this year, your deficit will be bigger next year. This is how Reagan, the Gipper, was able to triple the United States public debt. He increased it by 300% in his 2 years, his 2 terms in office. Mad Dog Bush the Younger didn't do quite as well, although in absolute terms he did better. He only doubled the national debt. So now we have the Tea Party people are being duped by the Republicans in the same way that the left libs were duped by Obama in 2007, 2008. The Tea Party people, many of them at least, the gullible ones, turned to the Republican Party to fight the deficit, reduce taxation, and so forth. So they say we want to fight the deficit by lowering taxes and cutting the budget. Well, lowering taxes and cutting the budget, you will double or triple the national debt. And of course, at this point, it's becoming a little bit dubious who's going to buy the national debt. The only thing that's holding up the U.S. national debt right now are these operations against Greece, Spain, Ireland, Italy, and so forth, with Spain actually complaining that Spain, as Zapatero now says, Spain is under attack by international speculators. That is correct. Name them. Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Barclays Bank. Those are the ones, the Anglo-American cabal. So that's a support operation for the dollar. It's a diversionary attack on these Southern European countries to try to pull down the euro to make the dollar look good by comparison, because there's no way you can make the dollar look good directly. Now, one other thing I wanted to point to in the discussions about the Dalai Lama this week, what is the effect of this tremendous U.S. assault on China going to be on the leadership succession inside the Chinese Communist Party? We have currently, of course, Prime Minister Hu Jintao, the President Hu Jintao, and Prime Minister Wen Jiabao. And Wen, of course, is this the person that we admire for his masterpiece of skating rings around Obama at the Copenhagen conference. But now we're looking forward to the 18th Party Congress of the Communist Party of China, which is going to be held in the fall of 2012. And we're now looking for the 5th generation of leaders since the original ones, Mao and Chu Enlai, to come to power. That is to say, the President and Prime Minister of China coming out of that 2012 Congress are likely to be from the 5th generation. And then you'll also see the 6th generation, the secondary leaders who will then get the succession 10, 15, 20 years down the line. It is generally thought in the West, at least, based on what I've been able to determine, that there are 2 factions in the Chinese Communist Party, the elitists and the populists. The elitists would be typified by President Jiang Zemin, Clinton's friend, you'll recall, from the 1990s. This would also include the Vice President of China today, Vice President Xi, X-I. The elitists, what are they concerned about? They're based in the coastal cities, Jiang Zemin, the Shanghai Mafia, the rich coast of China. They're concerned with international trade, currency. It's probably their decision to hold $2 to $3 trillion of their wealth in the form of paper when they've got 600 million poor people in the interior of the country. These are the elitists. The other group is known as the populists, and they are the Youth League faction. This would be President Hu, whose base was in the China Youth League, and Prime Minister Wen today. Those are the populists, and they are the ones who focus on this idea that you've got this contradiction developing between a very wealthy coast, the people in Shanghai and Guangzhou Canton, very, very well off comparatively, whereas that mass of 600 to 700 million peasants in the interior left behind and not receiving enough. They're receiving more than India, but they're not receiving enough to begin to close the gap. And therefore, it had been assumed that Vice President Xi from the elitists would take over as the next president after Hu, but that may not be so. The Vice Prime Minister Li, representing the Youth League faction, the populists, this entire process of succession may now be thoroughly radicalized by this frontal assault on those 12 issues plus everything to do with Iran, Pakistan, Sudan, Zimbabwe, the string of pearls across the Indian Ocean, the things that we've talked about now for some months. Obama and company, although they don't know it, may be radicalizing the process of succession inside the Chinese Communist Party in ways that they don't understand. The general attitude of the U.S. Think tank foreign policy community is the Chinese will have to like it or lump it. The Chinese will have to just essentially accept whatever the U.S. does, and they're going to have to cooperate on Iran, and they're going to have to do all these things. Back during the Vietnam era, this was called the arrogance of power. I guess what can we call it today? The arrogance of weakness, the arrogance of impotence. The Chinese are not forced to like it or lump it. They have very powerful means of retaliating. The idea being, of course, that the populists, for example, at the People's Liberation Army, the populist militarists are saying, dump U.S. bonds. And there's signs that about 30 to 40 billion of U.S. bonds were sold off by China late last year. Japan has now passed China once again to become the largest foreign holder of U.S. Treasury securities. Up to now, of course, the management of the Chinese securities has been in the hands of the central bank and others, where the elitist faction of globalizers seems to have been predominant. I'm just trying to say that if you have the United States conducting itself vis-a-vis China in this provocative, Cold War, hegemonistic way, it may be that you're cutting the ground out from under the globalizers and the globalists, the Jiang Zemin faction, and you may get something much more radical than you would expect, because this populist faction may indeed be resurgent. Now, another provocation that has come up. There's a company called let's see. This is the issue of. Well, we've run out of time. It's NetWitness alleges that special malware neighbor bot attacks have been launched out of China and Europe, Germany in particular, against various companies in the U.S., Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere. That this started in 2008, but they just noticed it now last month in the wake of the alleged Chinese attack on Google. So look for U.S.-Chinese bilateral relations to deteriorate rapidly. And we'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio. Keep up with me at Tarpley.net in the meantime.